While he could not tell me, I am convinced that he considered her unbalanced mentally at times, and dangerous. I had noticed nothing different in my sister Emily until last spring. At that time Mother began to worry about her personal fortune, and she finally decided to have some of it turned into gold, this gold to be kept in a chest under her bed. None of us approved, and Emily least of all, but Mother was determined. She arranged with her nephew, James Wellington, to make this exchange for her, and this he did under protest. I need not go into that. You know all that already. It was in April that I began to notice a change in Emily. She came in one day very white, and went into my mother's room. There they had an argument of some sort, and my mother was very angry after it. From that time on I felt that the relationship between them had changed. Emily was tearful at times, and once I found her in the storeroom with an old family photograph album. She was crying over it. Later I saw it in my mother's room. She kept it in the top drawer of the chest beside her bed. I am telling you this because the album caused me so much anxiety later, although I do not yet understand just why. I have wondered, but I must get on with this statement. Emily was my mother's nurse, and was in and out of her room at all hours. It was early in the summer that I began to wonder about the gold under Mother's bed. Emily had been the soul of honesty, but late one night I heard her coming out of Mother's room, and I opened the door. She heard me and she looked very much alarmed. There was a low light in the hall but I could see her plainly, and she was carrying something that looked like one of the canvas bags from the chest. When I knocked at her door she was some time in letting me in, and then she looked frightened. I did not know what to do. I went to Mother's room, but she had had her usual opiate and was sleeping soundly. The chest was closed and locked. After that I watched Emily as well as I could. I examined her room over and over while she was out, but I could find nothing. She hardly ever carried a purse, and the only places she went were to the library and to a woman on Liberty Avenue across from the library who she said was dying of a cancer. I even followed her once or twice, but she went nowhere else. If she had not been in such a state of terror I would have given up then. There was no gold or money in her room, and she evidently had no box in any bank. But she was so queer that at last I went to Brian Dalton. He laughed at me at first, but he too saw the change in her, and at last we agreed to keep a watch and see if she left the house at night. We established a sort of post office in our woodshed, and he would drop a note there. Usually it said, "All quiet." Sometimes he said she had come downstairs at night apparently for something to eat. But she never left the house. This will explain why Mr. Dalton has been involved in the case. He had nothing whatever to do with it. It was about the 1st of this month that my father became suspicious. Emily had professed to believe that someone was trying to get into the house at night, and that they were after the money under Mother's bed. On the night of August 1st, Father was sleepless and anxious. He had never approved of the hoarding anyhow, considering it dangerous as well as unpatriotic. That night he heard a sound from Mother's room, and he went in. Emily was on her knees beside the bed, and she screamed when Father spoke to her. That wakened Mother, but Emily said she was after a sleeping tablet herself and that it had dropped under the bed. I knew nothing of this until my father told me later on, after Mother's death. When Emily had gone, Father managed to examine the chest, but it was locked as usual, and so he went back to bed. He asked Mother after that to have the chest opened and the money recounted, but that annoyed her and he had to let it go for the time. It was more than 2 weeks before he finally decided to have it done, with or without her consent. Then, on the morning of Thursday, August the 18th, he told me exactly what he had seen, and I foolishly told him what I knew. While Emily was out at the library, I telephoned to Jim Wellington to come at 4 that afternoon, for what Father called an audit. Father had not told Mother, and it was to tell her that he came back after he had started for his walk that afternoon. He changed his mind, however, after he was in the house. She was asleep, and he decided to wait until Jim was there. I do not yet know how Emily learned about the audit, and the early afternoon was as you know it. Lydia Talbot brought Mother some things for her lunch, but was too late with them. Her sister-in-law, Mrs. John Talbot, left with Father at 3:30. It was my afternoon out, but I had arranged with Father not to go and was in my room. At 3:30, or a little later, I saw Brian Dalton walking from his garage toward our woodshed. Our servants could not see him from the lower floor, but I saw him from my window.